David was a man who loved history more than anything else in the world. Since he was a child, he had been fascinated by old stories, ancient places, and mysterious objects from long ago. His favorite thing to explore was shipwrecks, old ships, that had sunk to the bottom of the sea many years before. He liked to imagine the lives of the people who sailed those ships and the adventures they had. One bright morning, David set out on a new adventure. He had heard about a place along a quiet coastline where some old shipwrecks might still lie hidden under the waves. This place was not well known and rarely visited by others. David packed his diving gear and headed there, full of hope and excitement. The sun was shining and the water was calm as David jumped into the sea. The cool water surrounded him, and he began to swim deeper. The underwater world was full of colors and strange shapes. Fish swam past him and plants waved gently with the movement of the water. David felt peaceful and happy. He loved being under the sea, discovering things that had been lost for many years. After some time, David saw something strange on the ocean floor. It looked like wood, but old and covered with sand and sea plants. He swam closer and saw that it was part of a shipwreck. The wood was broken in many places, but the shape of the ship was still clear. David's heart beat faster. He had found something special. Carefully, David touched the wood. It was rough and worn, but still strong. He saw metal parts that had rusted but were still there. Around the shipwreck, pieces of pottery and old tools lay scattered. David knew these were treasures from the past. He looked around to see if there was anything more to find. As he explored the shipwreck, David noticed something unusual. Near the middle of the ship, hidden under some rocks and sand, was a small box made of wood. It was closed tightly, but looked very old. David tried to open it underwater, but it was too difficult. So he decided to take the box with him back to the surface. Swimming up slowly, David felt a mix of excitement and curiosity. What could be inside the box? Why had it been kept so carefully hidden? When he reached the surface, he opened the box, gently. Inside, he found some old papers and a piece of wood with strange marks carved on it. The papers were worn and fragile, but David could make out some words written in faded ink. He sat on the boat and looked at the papers closely. They told stories about the ship, its crew, and the journey they had made long ago. David was fascinated. He read about how the ship had sailed across rough seas and faced many dangers. It was a ship that had disappeared without a trace many years before, leaving behind only stories and legends. David felt a strange feeling as he held the piece of wood with the carvings. It was not just any relic. It seemed special. The marks looked like letters or symbols, but David could not understand them at first. He decided to take the relic home and study it more carefully. Back on land, David cleaned the piece of wood and looked at it under a magnifying glass. Slowly, he started to see the shapes of letters hidden in the carvings. They seemed to form a name, but it was hard to read clearly. David felt his heart skip a beat. The name looked familiar, almost like his own. David was puzzled. How could this relic from a long-lost ship have his name on it? He thought maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe someone had carved the name later. But the style of the carving looked very old, just like the shipwreck itself. That night, David could not stop thinking about the relic and the shipwreck. He dreamed about the ship sailing through storms, the crew working hard, and the mystery of its disappearance. The name carved on the wood kept coming back to his mind. It was like a secret message meant just for him. The next day, David started to research the history of the ship. He visited libraries and looked for old records and newspapers. He wanted to know everything about the ship's last journey and what had happened to it. Slowly, he discovered that the ship was called the Sea Wanderer. It was a famous ship that had sailed the ocean many years ago, carrying goods and passengers. According to the records, the Sea Wanderer had disappeared during a violent storm and was never found again. Many people had searched for it, but no one knew exactly where it had gone. The shipwreck David found was very likely the lost Sea Wanderer. David also found a list of the people who were on board the ship. He looked carefully at the names, and to his surprise, he saw a name very close to his own family key, a man named William Walker. William Walker was one of the crew members, and he lived in the same town as David's family many years ago. David felt a deep connection with the ship and the people on it. It was not just history anymore. It was part of his own family story. He wondered if the relic had been waiting for him to find it all this time. Over the next few days, David spent hours thinking about the ship and what secrets it might still hold. He felt like the ship had a story to tell, and he was the only one who could hear it. The relic was more than just a piece of old wood. It was a key to the past, a bridge between two times. David knew his life was about to change. The discovery of the shipwreck and the relic had opened a new chapter for him. He was ready to learn more, to uncover the truth about the Sea Wanderer, and to find out why the ship seemed to call to him in such a mysterious way. After David made the surprising discovery of the relic with the name on it, he could not stop thinking about what it meant. He felt a strong connection to the old shipwreck and the story of the Sea Wanderer. The more he thought about it, the more curious he became. He wanted to know everything. Who had been on that ship, what had happened to it, and why the relic had his family's name carved into it. David began to look deeper into his family history. He visited his parents and asked questions about their ancestors. His family was surprised to hear about the connection to the shipwreck because no one had ever talked about it before. David's grandfather had told stories of an ancestor who had been a sailor, but the details were always unclear. Now, David felt like a hidden piece of his family's past was finally coming to light. He spent days at the local library, searching through old newspapers, letters, and documents. It was not easy. Many records were faded or missing. But David was patient. He carefully read through old letters written by sailors and their families. He found one letter that caught his attention. It was written by William Walker, the man whose name was on the ship's crew list and who David believed was his great-great-grandfather. The letter was dated just weeks before the Sea Wanderer disappeared. In it, William spoke about his hopes for the future and how proud he was to be part of the crew. He also wrote about the dangers of the journey ahead. William seemed to believe the ship might face trouble, but he was determined to do his duty. David felt like he was reading the thoughts of someone very close to him, someone who had lived long ago but whose spirit was still alive in those words. One evening, while reading the letter again, David noticed something strange. At the bottom of the paper, there was a small symbol that looked like a key. It was drawn carefully, almost like a secret sign. David wondered what it meant. Could it be a clue to the ship's fate, or to the treasure the crew might have been carrying? The thought excited him and made him want to learn more. David also began to study the relic with the carved name more carefully. He showed it to experts in old artifacts and history. They told him that the piece of wood was probably part of the ship's steering wheel called a helm. The carvings looked like a family mark, a way for the crew to remember their loved ones and protect the ship. This made David feel even closer to his ancestor and the story of the Sea Wanderer. As the days passed, David's connection to the ship grew stronger. One night, something unusual happened. While David was alone at home, holding the relic, he suddenly heard a soft whisper. At first, he thought it was the wind or his imagination, but then the whisper came again, clearer this time, and he could make out words. The voice was gentle but firm, and it said his name, David. David was startled and did not know what to think. He looked around the room, but no one was there. The whisper came from the relic itself. It was as if the ship was trying to speak to him. David felt both scared and amazed. How could this be happening? Was it real, or just his mind playing tricks? After that night, the voice came to him several times. Each time it spoke his name and seemed to ask him to return to the shipwreck. The feeling was strong and real, and David could not ignore it. He began to believe that the ship and its crew wanted to tell him their story, to share the secrets that had been hidden for so long. David decided to prepare for another trip to the shipwreck. This time he wanted to explore the site more deeply and look for more clues. He gathered equipment and invited a few trusted friends who were also experienced divers. They agreed to help him, knowing how important this discovery was. When they arrived at the site, the water was clear, and the sun shone brightly above. David felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Diving down to the shipwreck again, he noticed things he had missed before. Parts of the ship that were still intact, old ropes, and even small pieces of jewelry and tools. As David and his friends explored, they found a hidden compartment beneath the ship's deck. Inside, there were old chests covered in seaweed and coral. Carefully, they opened one chest and found more papers, a few gold coins, and a small sealed box. David's heart raced. This was more than he had hoped for. Opening the box, David discovered a small leather-bound logbook. The pages were yellowed and fragile, but the writing was still clear. The logbook belonged to the ship's captain and contained daily notes about the voyage. As David read the captain's words, he learned about the challenges the crew faced: rough seas, storms, and dangers from pirates. Most importantly, the captain wrote about a secret mission. The Sea Wanderer was carrying a precious cargo meant to protect the Walker family's legacy. This cargo was a gift from a distant land, something valuable and powerful that needed to be kept safe at all costs. David felt a chill as he read this. The logbook mentioned a warning for the Walker family that they must protect the cargo and keep it secret. The captain had left this message, hoping that one day a member of the family would find it and continue the mission. At that moment, David understood why the ship seemed to call his name. It was not just a shipwreck or an old relic. It was a story waiting to be told and a mission waiting to be fulfilled. The ship, the crew, and his ancestor were all connected in a way he had never imagined. Filled with a new sense of purpose, David promised himself that he would protect the ship's secret and honor the memory of the Sea Wanderer and its crew. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face whatever came his way. David's discovery was more than history. It was a living connection to the past, a voice reaching across time to him. And now he was ready to listen. David couldn't get the voice from the relic out of his mind. Every time he held it, he thought he heard his name whispered softly, like the wind carrying a secret. At first, he doubted himself and wondered if it was just his imagination. But the feeling grew stronger each day, and he became sure that the ship was trying to communicate with him. One evening, after a long day of studying the logbook and other artifacts, David sat quietly in his living room. The room was dimly lit by a small lamp, and outside the night was calm and silent. Suddenly, the voice came again, clearer and louder this time. It wasn't just a whisper, it was a gentle call. "David," it said. David's heart jumped. He looked at the relic in his hand, wondering what it wanted him to do. The voice seemed to ask him to return to the shipwreck. It felt like a call for help, or maybe a message that only he could understand. David knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. He began to prepare for another dive at the site of the shipwreck. This time, he wanted to explore the ship more carefully and see if there were any other secrets hidden beneath the water. He invited two friends who were expert divers to join him. They were excited and curious about the mystery, and they trusted David's judgment. The day of the dive arrived, and the weather was perfect. The sky was blue, and the water was calm and clear. David felt nervous but also excited. As they reached the site, he looked at the old shipwreck below. The broken wood, the rusted metal, and the pieces of treasure were all reminders of a story frozen in time. David put on his diving gear and slowly descended into the water. His friends followed closely behind. The underwater world was peaceful, but full of hidden wonders. Fish swam around the shipwreck, and plants moved gently with the ocean's current. David felt like he was stepping into another world. As they explored, David's eyes caught something unusual near the back of the ship. It was a small opening, almost hidden by rocks and seaweed. He swam closer to investigate and found a narrow passage leading inside the ship's remains. With a deep breath, David entered. Inside the ship, the water was darker, and the space was tight. The walls were covered in algae, and broken pieces of wood floated gently. David's flashlight beam moved carefully over the walls, revealing strange symbols and carvings that he had never seen before. He wondered if these were messages left by the crew. Suddenly, David's light shone on something shiny. It was a small metal box, sealed but still strong after all these years underwater. David carefully lifted the box and showed it to his friends. Together, they brought it up to the surface. Back on the boat, David opened the metal box slowly. Inside, he found more papers, some old photographs, and a small wooden object shaped like a key. The photographs were of the ship's crew and their families. David recognized the face of William Walker in one of them. Seeing his ancestors' face made the mystery feel even more real. David studied the papers and found more notes from the captain. These notes spoke about the crew's loyalty and the dangers they had faced. There were also warnings about enemies who wanted to steal the ship's cargo. The captain's words were filled with hope and fear at the same time. The wooden key puzzled David. It looked ordinary, but felt heavy in his hand. He wondered if it could unlock something important on the ship. Excited by this new discovery, David and his friends planned to return to the shipwreck the next day to search for what the key might open. That night, David could barely sleep. The voice from the Relic came to him again, this time louder and more urgent. "Find the truth," it said. "Protect the secret." David understood that the ship's story was far from over. It was calling him to uncover all its hidden parts and to keep the legacy alive. The next day, David and his friends dived again. This time, they focused on the area near the ship's captain cabin. David used the wooden key to carefully check every lock and hidden door. After a long search, the key fit perfectly into a small chest buried under broken planks. Opening the chest, David found more treasures, old maps, letters, and a small chest filled with precious stones. But what interested him most was a sealed envelope addressed to the Walker descendant. His hands trembled as he carefully opened it. Inside the envelope was a letter written by the ship's captain. It explained that the ship carried a special gift for the Walker family, something meant to protect them and their future. The captain warned that this gift must never fall into the wrong hands. He asked the family to guard the secret carefully and to always remember their heritage. David read the letter again and again. The words filled him with pride and a sense of responsibility. He realized that the ship was not just a lost relic, but a message from the past. It was a call to protect something important, something that connected him to his ancestors. After the dive, David returned home with the treasures and letters. He felt changed. The ship's story was now part of his own story. He had become a guardian of history, chosen to keep the legacy alive. David also shared what he found with historians and experts. They were amazed by the discoveries and promised to help protect the shipwreck and its secrets. Together, they planned to create a museum exhibit to tell the story of the Sea Wanderer and the Walker family. But David knew his journey was not over. The ship's voice still whispered to him sometimes, reminding him of his mission. He felt ready to face whatever challenges might come. The connection between him and the ship had grown stronger, and he knew that he was no longer just a man. Searching for history, he was part of history itself. David's discovery of the ship's secret had changed his life in many ways. He now understood that the Sea Wanderer was more than just an old shipwreck. It was a part of his family's story and a link to the past that he had to protect. The letter from the captain and the precious cargo inside the chest filled David with a strong sense of responsibility. He knew that his journey was only beginning. As days passed, David spent more time learning about the ship and its crew. He read old books and talked to historians who helped him understand the importance of what he had found. The Sea Wanderer had sailed during a time of great change, and its mission was more important than anyone had realized. It carried not just goods, but a legacy meant to keep a family safe. David also thought about the warnings in the captain's letter. The captain had spoken about enemies who wanted to steal the precious cargo. Even though the ship had sunk so long ago, David wondered if those dangers still existed in some way. He felt the need to protect the secret carefully and quietly. One day, David received a call from a museum curator. The curator was excited about the discovery and wanted to help display the treasures in a special exhibition. David felt happy that the story of the Sea Wanderer would reach more people and that the history would not be forgotten. Together, they planned to show the ship's artifacts and share the story of the crew's courage and sacrifice. While working on the exhibition, David continued to visit the shipwreck site. He wanted to make sure it was safe and protected. With the help of local authorities, the site was marked as a protected area. This meant no one could disturb the shipwreck or take anything without permission. David felt proud that the history was being preserved for future generations. But even with these successes, David felt something more. The ship's voice, the quiet whisper that had called to him, still came from time to time. It was like a gentle reminder that his mission was not just about protecting treasures, but about understanding the deeper meaning behind the ship's journey. One evening, while David was studying the logbook again, he found a page he had missed before. This page was different. It told a story about hope and family, about the dreams the crew had for their loved ones, and the promise to protect what was most important. The captain wrote about faith, trust, and the strength of those who came before. Reading these words, David felt a wave of emotion. He realized that the ship's story was really about the power of family and the courage to face the unknown. The Sea Wanderer's journey was a symbol of hope, even in the darkest times. David thought about his own family and the challenges they had faced over the years. He felt connected to the crew and to his ancestor William Walker more than ever. It was as if their spirits were guiding him, giving him strength to carry on. With this new understanding, David decided to share the story of the Sea Wanderer in a way that would inspire others. He worked with local schools and community groups to create programs about history, bravery, and family heritage. He wanted people to learn not just about the ship, but about the lessons it carried through time. David also began to write a book about his journey, about the discovery of the shipwreck, the relic, and the secrets that had come to light. He hoped that by sharing his story, others would feel inspired to explore their own family histories and to appreciate the connections that tie us all together. As the exhibition opened at the museum, many people came to see the artifacts and hear the story of the Sea Wanderer. Visitors were moved by the courage of the crew and the mystery of the ship's disappearance. David stood among the crowd, proud and grateful. The ship's voice had reached many hearts, just as it had reached his own. Despite all this, David never forgot the personal mission the ship had given him. He continued to care for the relics and the site, always listening for the quiet call that reminded him of the past and the future. He knew that the story of the Sea Wanderer was alive and that he was part of its ongoing journey. David's life had been changed forever by a simple discovery under the sea. What had started as a chance find had become a powerful story of family, history, and hope. The shipwreck was no longer silent. It spoke to David, and through him, it spoke to the world. In the end, David understood that some treasures are not gold or jewels, but the stories and connections that survive through time. The Sea Wanderer had found its voice again, and David was its keeper. David's discovery of the Sea Wanderer and his connection to the ship had brought many changes to his life. The story had touched not only his heart, but also the hearts of many people who heard about it. The shipwreck had become more than just a mystery. It was a symbol of family, history, and hope for the future. After the museum exhibition was successful, David felt a deep satisfaction. People from all over came to see the treasures and learn about the brave crew who had sailed the Sea Wanderer. Many visitors told David how the story inspired them to explore their own family histories and to appreciate the courage of those who came before them. David realized that his journey had created a connection between the past and the present, and it was helping others find meaning in their own lives. But David knew that his work was not finished. The ship's secret was still something precious that needed protection. He worked closely with experts to make sure the shipwreck site remained safe from harm. Together, they created rules to protect the area so that the history would be preserved for generations to come. David also continued to study the artifacts and letters he had found. Each piece told a new part of the story, and David wanted to understand every detail. Sometimes, late at night, he would hold the relic that had started it all and think about the voices of the past. He felt a quiet strength from the ship, a reminder that the story was still alive. In the months that followed, David became a storyteller in his community. He visited schools, libraries, and local events to share the tale of the Sea Wanderer. His talks were filled with excitement and hope, inspiring young and old alike. He spoke about bravery, the power of family, and the importance of remembering where we come from. David's own family also grew closer during this time. They shared stories they had never talked about before and discovered new ways to honor their heritage. The story of William Walker and the Sea Wanderer became a source of pride and connection for everyone. David's children listened carefully to his stories, learning about the courage and love that had been passed down through the years. One day, David received a letter from a distant relative he had never met. The relative had heard about the discovery and wanted to share their own memories and family records. This brought even more pieces to the puzzle and helped David understand the full history of the Sea Wanderer. The family's past was coming together like a beautiful picture showing how every part was important. As time went on, David's story reached beyond his community. Historians and researchers from other countries showed interest in the Sea Wanderer and its legacy. David was invited to speak at conferences and share what he had learned. He felt proud to represent his family and the ship that had changed his life. Despite all the attention, David stayed humble. He remembered the quiet voice that had called to him from the relic and the shipwreck. That voice reminded him that his mission was not about fame, but about respect and care for the past. One evening, as David sat by the sea near the shipwreck site, he held the relic in his hands. The sun was setting, painting the sky with beautiful colors. He thought about the journey he had taken, from a simple discovery to a story that connected generations. The ship's voice was quiet now, but David knew it would always be with him. He promised himself that he would continue to protect the history and share the story with others. The Sea Wanderer's legacy was not just in the treasures it carried, but in the lessons it taught about courage, family, and hope. David understood that the past is never really gone. It lives in stories, memories, and the hearts of those who listen. The shipwreck that once seemed like just a relic had become a living story, speaking across time to remind people of what truly matters. In the end, David's journey was about more than history. It was about finding his place in the world and honoring the voices that came before him. The Sea Wanderer had spoken his name, and through him, its story would live on forever.